really like Avatar: The Last Airbender as a series. It is something that is near and dear to my heart, but I also think I'm tired of Avatar: The Last Airbender and the whole universe as a series. While Legend of Korra wasn't exactly perfect, I was a big defender of it when it came out. And despite all of its flaws, despite the difference between Korra and Aang, I thought it worked for the most part. It was never going to encapsulate the same level of mystique and lightning in a bottle that was Avatar: The Last Airbender. With how cohesive the themes were within Avatar versus Legend of Korra, it was just going to be inevitable that the comparisons of Korra as a sequel would just be a bit unfair considering just all the executive actions and taken during that time. That said, I also feel like my politics have moved past what Avatar: The Last Airbender is willing to actually commentate on. What I mean by this is that so much of the imperialism, uh, the themes of genocide, all these things have been kind of diluted and watered down within Avatar. I'm just so tired of the series and where they've taken it. There was this tweet that said, "Oh, Avatar is basically Nickelodeon's Star Wars at this point," and I mean that in a derogatory way, and I feel completely the same. I don't think it would be entirely impossible for Avatar to have a more mature, grounded, adult version of it that does tackle the themes of genocide, the themes of war more concisely, but and more brutally. But what we see is just an unwillingness to step away from the politics that it had and kind of just scoot along with the same themes over and over again. Like, this avatar is a total mess up, and the avatar after them needs to clean it up. And it also kind of is unfortunate that, it comes at the expense of Korra for Avatar Seven Havens. And it's one of those things where it's just, I have gotten so fatigued on the unwillingness to lean into its original source material. Some of the kind of documentation after the recent release of the movie Avatar Aang had talked about how they're moving away from using Chinese and now they're using a specific script for their language, or a basic one to English, right? So it's one of those things that kind of bothers me, where what made Avatar so grounded was it wasn't like flashy, completely like, say, a lot of modern anime. It was grounded in specific martial arts. It felt like there were rules to how you could bend. It felt like there were things that were permissible within the universe and then things that were not permissible in the universe. And now, like, with whole like this, there's a magical staff of spirit bending, and now, the world post Korra has all these spirits, and basically everything's falling apart, and there may be like alien esque technology. It just feels like it doesn't really know what it wants to be anymore. It's kind of exhausting, just as a world building mechanic, but also just as like someone who was actually emotionally invested in the politic at the time, where, oh, Legend of Korra expanded upon what is the role of the avatar post Aang, especially Aang being like a peace bringer, at least for his time. But then you have like the comics where it's like, okay, like all of the gang want to be a part of this neo-colonial project where it's like the Fire Nation builds the Republic City on Earth Kingdom land. And it's just one of those things where it's like, you know, I can forgive the authors for being a little bit like not as politically savvy when it comes to geopolitics, but it is one of those things where it's like, if you look out at this world building now, especially as someone who's maybe a little bit more left leaning than the world building itself, it's like, oh, here is this victim, or here's multiple victims of a genocide, Aang with his genocide of the air nomads. and then Katara with the genocide of the Southern Water Tribe, all just agreeing for this neo-colonial project. And then you have like things after Korra where it's like, okay, like Korra went through all this shit and somehow she's still blamed for everything. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, do you like your characters or not? Why is everyone so flattened for the next characters to come in? Why did Toph become a police officer? You know, it's these types of things that I feel like don't make sense to me as a person. Where even within, say, the movie, you see Sokka's character arc goes from like him who originally was a little bit of a coward. He was definitely like very misogynistic and wanted to be the quote unquote man of the household, but then realizes that he needs to be more of a strategist and he needs to be able to like be more flexible on his ideas of what is strength. And then we see him at like the movie not being willing to like command the ship, which is weird because like he's when he was younger, he literally drove that same exact ship, like, or at least one of the Fire Nation blimps. And then you have like basically him just there for like comedic effect. It kind of feels like I don't really care for Harry Potter, but it feels a lot like how Ron used to have character beats in Harry Potter, and then the directors of the movies decided, you know what, actually, we should just give those beats to Hermione. And we kind of see the same thing with like Zuko being the one who decided to strategize on how to save the ship, or at least like make sure that they don't crash as dramatically. We had a flattening of Katara's character where she kind of just takes the backseat to be Aang's caretaker, like the emotional therapist of the group, all while her skepticism of Taga doesn't feel like she acts on it very like she doesn't act on it the way I feel like Katara would. I feel like Katara would be a lot more brash about it and confrontational. And honestly, no one gave that much of a fight to Taga. It was like a 4 versus 1, and yet somehow they all got smacked, which is like, yeah, they've never seen airbending in being used to try to kill people, so I get it that they'd be surprised. But also, you'd think that people who have taken down, like, helped take down a whole nation, Imperial's nation, would be better at, like, combat in their 20s compared to their teens. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you made everything so fantastical that now the characters can't keep up because suddenly everything is just way unreasonable. You know, like, where is the Katara that would make water bending through her sweat? Where's the Katara that would find, you know, I don't know, the clouds and like make the precipitation turn into rain for her or something like that? I don't know. And then, you know, you had Toph being like, I'm the best metal bender slash earth bender there ever was. And then, like, Toph doesn't put up a fight. You see that, like, Toph doesn't even have, like, much of a character beat. And to be fair, like, Toph is more of a side character who works best within the dynamics with another character. So, like, there's that whole running gag of, like, everyone having their emotional moment with Zuko. There's also her going on a kind of a girls' day with Katara, and all these things that kind of culminate into Toph really supporting characters on their personal growths, and her, not to make a pun, but like being the most grounded character, being the most static character of her group. And it's one of those things where it feels like everyone else had to be flattened in order to make sure that Aang shined. And even within Aang's shine and character arc, which I don't necessarily hate, like him missing airbenders and him desperately wanting to bring them back, was not exactly a bad idea. It just feels like there was so much that they wanted to do within that time frame that just didn't happen on a plot basis. And moving back to Korra and seeing her legacy now that like the information of Seven Havens came out, I just feel kind of emotionally tired for Korra. Korra's constantly been a character that seems to be, I want to say like the writers don't like her. I just feel like within the source material, Korra consistently seems to be going through random ass stuff and still coming out as the villain or like considered to be at blame, which I just don't understand. And it's one of those things where it's like, a lot of it comes down to fan reception. Like, even though Korra herself is not black, she is brown. Like there's a level of like misogynoir that kind of plays a role in how she's being treated because she's a brash brown woman who is based off the Inuit tribes, and obviously the waterbenders are the darkest in complexion in the Avatar universe. It's just one of those things that's a little bit frustrating because it's like, okay, I can forgive it for the 4 seasons that like two of those seasons you thought were the end, and so you gave her like this ultimate villain that actually was not the ultimate villain, and now you have to figure out another storyline because the exec said you have more seasons to do. I get that. I also feel like season 2 of Legend of Korra really messed up the story in general, but that's a rant for another day. It's one of those things where I just feel like, wow, we have done so much within the Avatar universe and yet also have said nothing at all. Like, I don't think any of the critiques of imperialism or the world has really evolved outside of the original story plot within Avatar The Last Airbender. I feel like even the critiques of, like, say, Zakir and the Red Lotus with, like, kind of this almost anarchistic world view again just fall very flat when like the rest of the world building, like the villains have a point, but then the villains are also just like so egregiously evil in Korra's world that it's almost hard to like actually take them seriously at some points. Yes, like the fighting game seems fun and all this other stuff seems cool. I just feel like Avatar as a franchise just doesn't work for me because the original show was already so well knit and well put together that anything that comes after it kind of feels like you're unraveling what was already there, and now it feels like, okay, these expansions just kind of make the original cast seem worse, or like this like the actions of who was originally in the story seem a little bit weirder. And then you have, the live actions, which just don't understand Avatar as a series. Like every single change that they've made thus far just seems like they don't get why things happened within the original show the way they did. And I'm not saying I'm opposed to storylines being different for a different medium. I feel like there is this idea that like to make things edgy, everyone needs to be unlikable or everyone needs to be like a little bit more angry. I don't understand that at all. I also feel the martial arts within the show, it has improved in season 2, but it's also just one of those things where the martial arts themselves cannot save just the way that Avatar as a series works because the like water still looks bad. The airbending still looks weird. Same thing with the earth bending. It's just one of those things where it's like I don't know if a live action format can ever reach the budget required to make it look interesting, right? Like it would need a lot more practical effects, and I just don't think that is available to them. And also need like people who are exceptionally competent at martial arts in order to really sell everything, right? And I think they've gotten better at that, but I also feel like it's still lacking. That the live action wouldn't be as bad if, say, it would took more of an Andor approach, where it takes a little bit more of the grit and reality of the situations within this universe and takes it a little bit more seriously. I don't think that's a bad plan. I just feel like the way they have gone about it does not feel like they actually have tried to do that, and what they've tried to do is just like create a universe where there's like a lot more action but like no substance. What's there to say about like Avatar as a series? I feel like this has been short, but I just have to get it off my chest because I feel like I'm just so emotionally exhausted by Avatar as a series now. And it's really sad because it's a series that like I adored as a child. I really liked Avatar The Last Airbender growing up, and it feels like something where the more and more that like someone creates content for it or they create a new thread line for it, it feels like it's taken away from the magic of the original series, and it almost just kind of feels like another like thing to binge watch, or another thing where it became popular and now like I don't understand what's happening in it anymore. I don't feel emotionally connected to it the same way I used to, which really sucks because it was one of the few representations we had as like Asian children growing up, and I don't know. It feels emotionally exhausting to like see more content from Avatar, despite liking the series. Please, let's just make new shows. Let's just retire Avatar.